No one asked where he came from. But when the tray slipped and crystal hit marble, all 400 guests turned to watch him fall. Miles didn't speak. The ballroom at the Langston Grand shimmered in gold and glass, a cathedral for the elite. Outside, April rain pattered against black sedans and security umbrellas. Inside, perfume and money saturated the air. Laughter had been flowing like champagne, until now. The tray had been overloaded. 12 flutes, all hand-cut Czech crystal. A tilt, a slick spot underfoot, and then the crash. Sharp, final, loud enough to choke conversation. Miles dropped to one knee, hands steady, even as blood bloomed from where a shard had sliced into his palm. "Unbelievable," muttered a voice behind him. Dorian Elamine stood in the center of it all, lit like the star of a stage he never had to audition for. 45, Petroleum Empire, ex-Oxford, built like a man who believed in his own invincibility. His cufflinks sparkled beneath the chandelier as he turned toward Miles with a look that was more amusement than anger. "That piece alone was worth more than his rent," someone whispered. Dorian smiled thinly. "Maybe more than his neighborhood." Laughter rippled, tight and rehearsed. Beside him, Sabine Moreau, his fiancée, leaned against the edge of a marble pillar. 29, television beauty, all French cheekbones and old Hollywood posture. She laughed like it was scripted, tilting her head with a cruel softness. "Oh, Dorian," she purred. "He looks like he belongs in the service hallway, not the ballroom." Miles didn't rise. He gathered the glass with a linen napkin, his fingers working calmly. One by one, he lifted each shard as if they mattered. The music had stopped. The band waited for a cue, but no one moved. Dorian tilted his glass toward the DJ booth. "Play something," he said, careless. "Something dramatic." And just like that, the speakers breathed life again. Slow, sultry, Argentine tango. The notes coiled like smoke through the air. Dorian turned back toward Miles, a wicked gleam in his eye. "Tell me," he said. "Do you dance?" Miles paused, his eyes still on the last crystal shard. Sabine snorted. "He probably doesn't know what tango is." But Dorian wasn't speaking to her anymore. "I said," he repeated, "do you dance?" Miles stood. Blood darkened the linen in his hand. His uniform, plain black, carried no name tag, just a faint thread where one used to be. He looked at Dorian like he was measuring distance, not power. "I used to," he said. "Well then." Dorian turned, raising his voice just enough. "Ladies and gentlemen, a wager. If this man can dance this tango better than my beautiful bride-to-be, I will marry him instead." The room broke. Laughter, gasps, applause, disbelief. Champagne spilled as glasses were raised. Phones were angled discreetly. The absurdity was irresistible. Sabine tossed her curls. "You are drunk," she said. "And you are nervous," he replied smoothly. She scoffed, then stepped forward with a dancer's confidence. She had trained years ago, enough to be graceful in public. Her hips swayed. She turned in time with the music, sultry and precise. Men clapped. Women smiled with guarded admiration. She ended with a practiced flourish, arms outstretched like a silk-draped blade. Then came silence. Miles took the floor. He didn't bow. Didn't smile. Just breathed once, deeply, like drawing in something long buried. Then he moved. It was not performance. It was memory. Each step grounded him. Each pivot carried weight. He did not spin so much as shift, like weather. The ballroom receded. The chandeliers dulled. There was only him, and the music, and the tension he carved through the space. The audience stopped breathing. His body spoke in rhythms older than the floor beneath him. Anger and grace, sorrow and fire, elegance without apology. He danced with the restraint of someone who had lost more than just a career. He danced like it was not for them. When the music ended, he stood still. For 1 second. 2. Then applause cracked like thunder. Even the waitstaff clapped, wide-eyed. Sabine turned pale. Dorian blinked slowly, the grin on his face unmoving but uncertain. "Who taught you to dance like that?" he asked. Miles tilted his head. "Not someone you'd know." The DJ lowered the volume. A phone rang in Miles's pocket. He answered without looking. "Yes, Dr. Carr," he said calmly. "Yes, the documents are in hand." A beat of silence stretched across the room. Dorian frowned. "Doctor?" Miles ended the call and looked back at him. "You said you would marry whoever danced better," he said. "I did," Dorian replied, chuckling nervously. "But surely you know I was joking." Miles said nothing. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, creased envelope, placed it on a nearby table. Dorian watched as Miles walked away, calm as stone. On the envelope, in black ink, "To be opened when truth no longer offends you." The laughter did not return that night, only whispers. And in the dark corners of the Langston Grand, the first cracks began to show. The envelope sat untouched on the table beside the champagne tower, a quiet dare no one wanted to claim. Miles disappeared through the staff corridor without a word. Behind him, the ballroom buzzed in confusion. The dance had ended, but no one remembered the music. Sabine stood frozen near the stage, her breath caught between disbelief and humiliation. Dorian Elamine, once the axis of every conversation, now stared at the envelope like it had teeth. He picked it up. His hand hesitated at the seal. The lights above felt hotter than they had minutes ago. Around him, the murmurs sharpened. "What is it?" Sabine asked. "Nothing," Dorian said too quickly. "Just a stunt." But he did not put it down. Elsewhere, in the basement hallway between linen storage and the kitchen, Miles washed the blood from his hand. The water was cold. His reflection in the mirror above the sink was unfamiliar, older, sharper, but intact. He dried his palm slowly, tracing the faint scar already forming. 3 years. 3 years of serving men who never saw him. 3 years of footsteps behind curtains, whispered orders, 1,000 conversations passed off as harmless because no one thought he mattered. He had always paid attention. He hung the towel and stepped out, not toward the locker room, but toward the freight elevator at the far end of the hall. He scanned his card. A small green light blinked once. The doors groaned open. Miles stepped in and pressed B2. The elevator shook as it descended past where most staff knew to go. At the bottom, the doors opened into a long corridor lined with concrete and silence. A single camera blinked red. He walked until he reached a small door marked with peeling black paint. Inside was a narrow office filled with filing cabinets and a single desk. A woman sat waiting, her glasses perched low on her nose, a laptop open before her. "You were late," she said without looking up. "Had to finish my shift," Miles replied. Dr. Clara Carr closed the laptop. She was in her 60s, lean as a wire, with eyes that had long forgotten how to be surprised. "Did he open it?" she asked. "Not yet," Miles said. She nodded. "He will. Men like him cannot stand mysteries." He sat across from her. "It begins tonight." "No," she corrected. "It began 7 years ago." Miles's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Back upstairs, the party had splintered. Some guests left early, murmuring about meetings in the morning. Others hovered in clusters, whispering theories and gossip. Sabine cornered Dorian in the hallway outside the wine room. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. "A performance," he said stiffly. "A waiter with rhythm. Nothing more." "He made you look like a fool." Dorian's voice turned cold. "He made you look like an amateur." Sabine's eyes narrowed. "You are not seriously entertaining that stunt." He did not answer. In his hand, the envelope still waited. He opened it 2 hours later, alone in his penthouse suite overlooking Central Park. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You forgot me. I never forgot you. Golden Palms Resort, Miami, room 914, October 12th, 2017. You made a call that night. Dorian's face drained. He dropped the paper and reached for his phone. Downstairs, Miles stepped out of the building into the rain. He had changed into his street clothes, dark jeans, hoodie, worn sneakers. The city air was thick with spring fog and exhaust. He walked 3 blocks, took a right on Amsterdam, and slipped into a diner that smelled like burnt toast and old jazz. In the back booth, a man waited with 2 mugs of coffee. "Rough night?" he asked. "Good enough," Miles said, sliding into the seat. The man, Vincent Hale, was once a federal analyst before resigning under pressure. Now he worked in shadows, archiving, decrypting, remembering what powerful men wanted forgotten. Vincent pushed a flash drive across the table. "Full audio from that call, plus the bank logs you asked for." Miles pocketed it. "The shell accounts?" "Traced. They led back to one of Elameen's private holdings. Same name listed on the offshore deal that tanked your contract in Argentina." Miles stared into his coffee. "He used the same playbook." Vincent nodded. "Arrogance makes men lazy." Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. "Do you want the press leak timed with the arrest?" Vincent asked. "Not yet," Miles replied. "Let him squirm." Vincent studied him. "You waited years for this. Why now?" Miles's voice was quiet. "Because it is not revenge yet." He finished his coffee and stood. Back at the Langston, Dorian sat alone in his study, fingers trembling as he dialed a number he had long buried. "Gerald," he said into the phone, "we have a problem." Across the line, an old voice groaned. "Tell me it is not about the dancer." "He is not just a dancer," Dorian whispered. And somewhere in a storage room beneath the hotel, a backup drive began uploading. The backup drive finished uploading at 3:42 a.m., stored under a false project name on a private server routed through Panama, then Dublin, then Atlanta. The data had no title, no subject line, just a timestamp and a single tag: Cassandra. Vincent watched the final file sync, then powered down the device. The hum of the small room faded into silence. He turned off the light and locked the case with a simple, deliberate click. Outside, Miles waited on the fire escape. "You are early," Vincent said, stepping through the metal door. "You are predictable," Miles replied. They walked together along 52nd, the city mostly asleep, save for a few cab drivers and deli workers blinking beneath harsh fluorescence. The storm had passed, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under street lamps. "What happens now?" Vincent asked. Miles shoved his hands in his coat pockets. "We let the first thread unravel. You want the whole sweater to fall. I want the whole machine to choke on its own silence." Vincent lit a cigarette. "You always did speak like a writer." Miles glanced sideways. "That is what I was. Before all this." Vincent said nothing for a while. Then, softly, "You could be again." Miles looked up at the city skyline, at the way the tallest towers swallowed the sky like ambition gone rabid. Maybe, but not yet. By sunrise, the first emails had gone out. Carefully composed, anonymously routed, containing portions of the call transcript from 2017, just enough to seed questions, not accusations. 3 journalists received it. 1 senator's aide. A partner at a small but vicious legal firm specializing in whistleblower protections. No names were named, just initials. Dates. A suggestion of cover-up. By noon, the stock price of Elameen Global Petroleum dipped 3%. Just a shiver. Just nerves. Dorian noticed. He sat in the conference room of his midtown tower, glass walls offering a perfect view of his shrinking kingdom. His legal counsel, Ethan Weiss, shuffled through a folder of printed screenshots, his brow lined with worry. "It started this morning," Ethan said. "A few reporters asked if you were ever in Miami in 2017. "I go to Miami every year," Dorian replied, cool but tense. Then they asked about a woman named Rosa Delgado. She was the guest whose jewelry went missing. Dorian exhaled slowly. That case was closed. Ethan looked at him sharply. "You mean buried?" The room went still. "What do they know?" Dorian asked. "Not much yet, but if someone's leaking pieces, they likely have the whole thing, and whoever they are playing chess." Dorian stood, walked to the window. The city looked smaller from above, or maybe it was just him. "I want you to find out who sent the leak." "We are trying," Ethan said. "The encryption is federal grade." Dorian's jaw tensed. "Then find someone who thinks above federal grade." Down in the Bronx, Miles visited a 2-story brownstone tucked between an abandoned church and a closed-down bodega. The fence was rusted, the porch sagging, but the windows were clean. He knocked twice, waited. A young man answered, eyes cautious but familiar. "Jalen," Miles said. The boy nodded, then stepped aside. Inside, the living room doubled as a studio. Wooden floors, a cracked mirror across one wall, a speaker system made of salvaged parts. On the far shelf sat a dusty trophy. First place, National Youth Tango Invitational, 2014. "You still dance?" Miles asked. Jalen shrugged. "Not much." "Why?" The boy hesitated. "Because when they took you down, they took the program with you. Sponsors pulled out. Nobody wanted to fund something tainted." Miles sat on the bench near the mirror. "That was the point." Jalen crossed his arms. "You just disappeared." "I was protecting what I could." "You could have told us." Miles met his eyes. "Would you have believed me at 16? When every headline said I was a thief and every adult around you nodded like it was true?" Jalen looked away. "I am here now," Miles said. "For what?" "To fix it?" "To finish it." Jalen studied him. "You got proof now?" Miles nodded. "Then burn them." Miles smiled faintly. "Not yet. There is still one thing I need from you." "What?" "Your performance footage. The one we filmed the night before the academy shut down." Jalen frowned. "Why?" "Because I am going to remind the world what they tried to erase." That evening, Dorian received a call from an unknown number. He answered, expecting a reporter. Instead, a voice spoke softly. "Mr. Elamine, your son Daniel has been detained at JFK, attempted customs bypass with unregistered currency." Dorian's blood turned cold. "What?" $50,000 in undeclared bills, also a vial in his carry-on. We are still testing the contents. "Who are you?" The voice paused. "A reminder that silence always has a cost." The line went dead. Dorian stood still in his office. A gust of wind rattled the high windows. He turned slowly toward the liquor cabinet and poured 2 fingers of scotch, his hands trembling. He drank it in one swallow. Then he opened his laptop and typed a name he had not searched in years. Miles D. Ashton. No results. He tried again. This time, a link appeared. No image, no title. Just a black screen with one phrase at the center. "We remember what you forget." Dorian slammed the laptop shut. And somewhere, in a half-lit dance studio in the Bronx, Miles watched as the video of a 17-year-old Jalen took over the social media feeds of the city's art scene, tagged with only one phrase. "He was never invisible, you just refused to look." The dance video went viral before midnight. No branding, no captions, just movement. Jalen, 17, barefoot in an empty gym, moving with the precision of muscle memory and the pain of abandonment. The footage was raw, handheld, unedited. At the 2-minute mark, when he fell to one knee and rose into a pirouette, the comments began pouring in. Who is this? Why is no one talking about this kid? This feels like something stolen from us. By dawn, arts blogs had picked it up. By noon, 4 major choreographers had reposted it. And by evening, a trending hashtag had emerged. Forgotten Grace Miles sat in a darkened apartment above a laundromat in Harlem, the light of the laptop screen flickering across his face. He did not smile. He did not react. Just watched. The boy he had once trained was not asking for attention. He was demanding memory. Outside, sirens passed. Somewhere down the block, a child cried. But in this room, there was only the sound of keys tapping as Miles began uploading the next piece. Not a video, a contract. It bore the header of Elamine Global and the signature of one Gerald K. Renshaw, a name rarely mentioned but quietly known. A document that nullified a scholarship program and transferred $400,000 in donor money into a private holding account registered in Curaçao. At the bottom, another signature, Daniel Elamine. Miles added no commentary, no accusations, just a timestamp, and a title, This Was Never About Art. He hit publish. The legal team at Elamine Global was still scrambling over the first leak when this one hit. The public relations director vomited in the executive bathroom after the second wave of phone calls. Dorian sat in his office, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot, trying to process how the narrative had slipped from his grip. This is not journalism, he growled. This is an attack. Ethan Weiss stood by the window, arms folded. No, this is evidence. Dorian turned. You are my counsel, not my judge. I am both now, Ethan said quietly. I warned you. Dorian took a slow breath. We can still control this. How? We buy silence. Ethan shook his head. The man leaking this does not want money. He wants the whole truth spoken out loud. Then we discredit him. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And how do you plan to discredit a man you buried, who came back holding your signature? Dorian said nothing. That night, Jalen received an invitation from the American Conservatory of Dance. Full scholarship. Live audition not required. Recommendation based solely on the footage now seen by over 6 million viewers. He printed the letter in silence, then walked the 2 blocks to the old community center that had once been the Academy's heart. The building was condemned, windows broken, doors chained, but someone had cut the chain. Inside, under dusty lights, Miles stood alone with a mop and bucket. Jalen stepped in, holding the letter. You did this, he said. Miles looked up. No, you did. Jalen held up the paper. This is my shot. Again. Miles nodded. Then do not waste it. Jalen looked around. What is this place to you now? Miles leaned on the mop. A grave. And maybe a garden. Jalen folded the letter and put it in his pocket. Are you rebuilding it? No, Miles said. You are. Across the city, in a high-rise hotel bar, Gerald Renshaw sat in a corner booth, drink untouched, face pale. His phone had rung 12 times that day with blocked numbers. He knew what it meant. Someone was pulling the curtain back. He stared at the door, waiting. At 9:03 p.m., Miles arrived. No suit, no briefcase, just a plain coat, his hands in his pockets. Gerald did not greet him, just stared. You really want to destroy us, the old man said. No, Miles replied, sliding into the booth. You did that yourselves. I am just removing the noise so the truth can breathe. Gerald leaned forward. Do you know what kind of world you are stepping into? Miles met his gaze, calm. Yes. Do you remember the girl from Argentina? The one your company blacklisted when she spoke about Daniel? Gerald blinked. I remember, Miles said, because she came to me 2 years later. She still had her boarding pass, her letter of dismissal, and the voicemail Daniel left her the night he overdosed in Sao Paulo. Gerald's mouth opened, closed. Miles pulled a folded page from his coat and laid it on the table. It was a copy of a check. $100,000, signed by Gerald. Memo, community outreach donation. Recipient, Ashton School of Dance. You thought I would take the bribe, Miles said. Gerald's hands trembled slightly. I did not come for your money, Miles continued. I came for what you never gave, your name, your face, attached to the damage. Gerald sat back, silent. This ends, Miles said, with a press conference, with the truth, or I bury you with the rest of the documents. You will ruin us, Gerald whispered. No, Miles said, standing. You did that already. He walked out into the night. A block away, his phone buzzed. One message. Dr. Carr. Press cleared. 11 o'clock a.m. City Hall steps. You ready? Miles stared at the screen, then typed, Ready. City Hall sat like a stone throne under a bruised morning sky. By 10:42 a.m., the steps were crowded. Cameras clicked, reporters murmured into handheld mics, interns paced with clipboards and whispered names into earpieces. There was no podium, no banners, just a row of concrete and expectation. Miles stood behind the marble balustrade inside the east vestibule, watching the crowd from behind the tall glass. He wore no suit, just a dark gray overcoat, collar turned up against the wind, hands still. Dr. Carr stood beside him, reading from her notepad. 2 major networks are here, 5 independents, and someone from the Attorney General's office just arrived. They are not saying anything, but they are listening. Miles did not answer. She turned to him. You do not have to speak long, just enough. Let the documents speak the rest. I know. He checked his watch. 10:56. Dr. Carr glanced at him. Nervous? No. She waited. He adjusted the sleeve of his coat. I am used to being watched. She nodded once. Not like this. Outside, the first questions were already flying. Is this about the Elamine Foundation? Is the dancer going to speak? Is the scholarship money connected to the oil contracts? Miles stepped outside at exactly 11 o'clock. The silence was immediate. Dozens of eyes turned, dozens of phones rose, and the morning felt colder. He stepped to the 3rd step, slightly elevated, and looked over the crowd. His breath was slow, measured. The same breath he used before each performance, when everything had to fall away except precision and truth. He spoke without microphone. In 2017, I was accused of theft by a guest at the Golden Palms Resort in Miami. No evidence, no investigation, just accusation and removal. The crowd leaned forward. Before that moment, I was director of the Ashton Dance Collective, training underserved youth in competitive and expressive dance. 124 students passed through our doors in 3 years. Many earned national recognition. Several were offered scholarships. One of those scholarships was revoked the day I was accused, not because of evidence, but because of silence. Cameras clicked like rain on windows. That silence, he said, was not just from one man. It was a system, a network of people who believed that truth was negotiable and reputation expendable. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thin folder. These documents reveal that money allocated to community arts programs was rerouted into private shell companies connected to El Amin Global. It reveals that contracts were awarded not based on merit, but compliance, that accusations were used to discredit and erase. He handed the folder to the front row of reporters. I do not speak today for revenge. I speak because silence no longer protects anyone but the powerful. He stepped back. A dozen questions flew up at once. He did not answer. Dr. Carr touched his arm. He turned, and they walked together down the side steps, away from the crush of voices, into the city's noise. Back at the El Amin Tower, Dorian watched the press conference in silence. The TV volume was muted, but the closed captions moved fast. His reflection in the glass wall behind the screen was motionless, like a painting of a man caught too late in a fire. Ethan Weiss stood behind him. The AG's office is issuing subpoenas. The press is requesting statements. Your board wants a vote. Dorian blinked once. A vote? To remove you. Dorian turned. They cannot. They will. Outside the boardroom, 2 security officers waited, not discreetly. Dorian adjusted his cufflinks. I built this empire. Ethan did not blink. And now it is burning. Dorian's phone vibrated. One message. Unknown. Check your email. Final receipt enclosed. He opened his inbox. One file. An audio recording. He hit play. His own voice echoed through the office speakers. Plant the jewelry. No one will question a black instructor. I need this buried before the press arrives. His shoulders sagged. Ethan walked to the door. Do you have anything to say? He asked. Dorian looked away. Ethan nodded. I will take that as a no. Down in Midtown, Jalen stepped out of a taxi in front of the conservatory. His shoes were polished, his tie crooked. He straightened it, looked up at the arched facade, then took a breath and entered. Inside, the reception area buzzed with rehearsals and rapid footsteps. A young woman greeted him with a clipboard. Jalen Carter? Yes. You are on Studio 3's roster. They are expecting you. He followed the signs. In the studio, light poured through the tall windows. Other dancers warmed up in silence. He removed his coat, tightened his laces, stood at center floor. He closed his eyes and remembered. He remembered the first time Miles corrected his balance with the softest tap to the shoulder. Remembered the nights he danced barefoot on cold concrete when the power was out. Remembered the silence of losing it all. And now, he danced. No music, no mirror, just instinct and gravity and breath. The panel watched without notes. When he stopped, the room held still for a beat too long. Then one judge nodded. Jalen walked out into the cold air 30 minutes later, heart pounding. Across town, Miles received the call. He did well? He asked. Dr. Carr's voice smiled on the line. He reminded them what they forgot. Miles stood at the edge of a rooftop, watching the city bleed gold under a winter sun. He said nothing, only listened. The headlines came fast. El Amin Empire implodes amid fraud allegations. Former executive accused of orchestrating cover-up. Anonymous dancer sparks federal investigation. By Friday morning, Dorian's name was scrubbed from the company website. The foundation's page was under maintenance. Investors fled. Partners released statements of profound concern. The Board of Ethics at Oxford initiated a formal review of his honorary degree. He watched the collapse from his penthouse window, a silent god exiled from his own altar. For the first time in years, no one answered his calls, not even Sabine. The house staff did not return the next day. His breakfast tray remained untouched, and no one came to clear it. Downstairs, in a small brownstone studio in Harlem, the Ashton Collective reopened its doors. There was no ribbon cutting, no press, just quiet movement. Jalen arrived early, wearing old sneakers and a black hoodie. He helped Miles sweep the floors and tape the corners of the mirror. Neither spoke. At noon, the first student knocked, an 11-year-old girl with shy eyes and a scar on her chin. Her name was Layla. She had never danced before. Her mother waited outside, uncertain. Jalen showed her the basic stance. Miles adjusted her posture without a word. When she faltered, they did not rush to correct. They waited, then tried again. By 1:30 p.m., 4 more students had arrived. By 3 o'clock, the floor was full. Outside, snow had begun to fall in thin, slow spirals. Inside, a new kind of silence took root. That evening, Miles sat at the back of the studio, watching the last student tie her shoes. Jalen approached, his face flushed from teaching. "You are not going to dance with them?" he asked. Miles shook his head. "Not yet." Jalen glanced toward the window. "You think they will come after you?" Miles shrugged. "They already did. Once." Jalen leaned against the wall. "You never told me what really happened that night in Miami." "There is nothing new to say," Miles replied. "I was set up, lied about, removed." Jalen studied him. "That part I know. But what happened after?" Miles took a long breath. "I waited. I listened. I learned how they move, where they hide, what they are afraid of." "Which is?" "History." Jalen nodded slowly. "That is why you documented everything." "Not just for me," Miles said. "For every kid who will not get the benefit of the doubt." They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Jalen stood. "Layla asked if she could come back tomorrow." "She can," Miles said. Jalen smiled. "I told her the studio belongs to her now." Miles watched him walk out into the snow. A block away, Gerald Renshaw met with federal investigators for the 3rd time that week. His face was thinner, paler, the swagger gone. In exchange for full cooperation and disclosure, he had been offered a reduced sentence and relocation. He accepted, quietly. What he did not know was that Miles never intended to press for prison. Exposure was the sentence. Prison was a chapter for people still useful. At the end of the week, a new donation appeared in the Ashton Collective's account. Anonymous. Large. Miles knew who sent it. He never touched the funds. Instead, he created a grant in Jalen's name and gave Layla her first pair of real ballet shoes. The press had stopped calling. They had moved on. Another scandal in D.C., another celebrity divorce, another viral collapse. Miles was grateful for the silence. One morning he received a letter in the mail, handwritten. The envelope smelled faintly of perfume and citrus. "Dear Mr. Ashton, you do not know me, but I watched what you did. I saw how you carried your silence, then your truth. I used to believe that the only way to survive was to smile and say nothing. But now I think survival is not enough. My daughter wants to dance. I told her she could. I told her about you. Thank you for making room for us." It was signed, S. Alvarez. Miles folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer beside only 2 other things, the original expulsion notice from the Golden Palms Resort and a photograph of the first class he had ever taught. He closed the drawer gently. Later that night, the studio filled with music. Jalen had stayed late. He was rehearsing something new, something sharp and slow, full of broken stops and sudden grace. Miles watched from the doorway. The boy had grown stronger, less angry, more certain. When the music ended, Jalen turned. "You remember this choreography?" Miles nodded. "I added something." "I saw." "You want to try it?" Miles hesitated, then took off his coat and stepped barefoot onto the floor. They stood opposite each other. No mirror, no audience. Just the wooden floor, the rhythm in their heads, and the quiet knowledge of what it had cost to return here. They began. Each movement carried weight, not showmanship, not defiance, just truth told in motion. Miles's body remembered pain, but also clarity. Jalen moved like someone who had learned the value of waiting without disappearing. The final step landed. They stood still, breathing, not for applause, just for themselves. Outside, the snow deepened, but inside, the lights stayed on. The invitation came wrapped in linen paper, heavy as stone. No email, no phone call. Just an envelope slid beneath the studio door late one afternoon as the snow began to melt. It bore the crest of the Arden School of Movement, a prestigious conservatory tucked in the hills of Northern California. Miles recognized it immediately. He had once auditioned there, years ago, before everything unraveled, before his name meant scandal, before silence became a habit. He read the letter alone at the back of the studio. They were offering him a position, not adjunct, not guest, artistic director. The letter mentioned his recent contributions to the national discourse on equity and artistic integrity. It referenced the Ashton Collective. It used the words transformational and visionary. But what caught his eye was the final paragraph. We believe you carry a language that cannot be taught, only remembered. We would be honored to build something with you, from the ground up. He folded the letter neatly, slid it back into its envelope, stared at the floor for a long time. That evening, Jalen noticed something in Miles's face. Not tension, not fatigue, a hesitation. You all right? He asked. Miles nodded once. Just thinking. Jalen did not press. The next day, Miles sat across from Dr. Carr at their usual coffee spot, a corner shop with chipped mugs and a single working heater. You are leaving, she said without question. I have not said that. You did not need to. He stirred his coffee. They offered me the position. I would be surprised if they had not. Silence stretched between them. She leaned forward. Why now? Because I finally have the choice. Dr. Carr folded her hands. And what would you leave behind? Miles exhaled. A room that finally opened its doors. Her eyes softened. Then the question is not what you leave. It is what you take with you. That night he walked the studio after the students left. The lights were dim, the mirrors fogged with breath and effort. On the far wall, Jalen had hung a photograph. Their first class, blurry and off-center, but full of laughter. Miles stared at it a long time, then turned out the lights. The following morning, he called a meeting. All students, all parents. Dr. Carr, Jalen. Even the building manager who had reduced their rent after the press storm. He stood at the center of the dance floor, hands folded. They have asked me to leave, he said. Not because I failed, but because I survived. A quiet murmur rippled through the room. I am considering it. Jalen looked down. But this place, Miles continued, does not end with me. He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim folder. In this file is a 5-year lease, paid in advance, utilities covered, renovations approved, studio license renewed. He handed it to Dr. Carr. Jalen will take over the instruction. With help. Dr. Carr will manage operations. The scholarships will continue. The doors will remain open. A mother in the back wiped her eyes. Miles turned to the students. This room was never mine. It was just waiting for you. Layla stepped forward. But you will come back, right? Miles crouched to meet her eyes. I will always be watching. She handed him a folded paper. A drawing. 2 stick figures dancing. One had curly hair and a shirt labeled M. He smiled and tucked it into his coat. On his last night in New York, Miles walked the streets with no direction. The city had changed around him. Where once he walked invisible, he now passed strangers who looked twice, some with recognition, others with reverence. He paused at the steps of the Meridian Hotel. A new name adorned the front. The windows had been remodeled. The golden light no longer shimmered like armor. It felt honest, soft. He did not go inside. Instead, he stood for a moment, remembered the night everything cracked. Not just the crystal, but the illusion, the order, the hierarchy. Then he turned and kept walking. Across the country, the Arden campus awaited. It was quiet there. Fog over trees, wooden studios surrounded by wild grass and old stone. No paparazzi, no press, just dancers, music, and space. When Miles arrived, the dean greeted him personally. "Your office is upstairs," she said, "but the main studio is open. I thought you might want to see it first." He entered alone. It smelled of rosin and cedar. Sunlight poured through the high windows in long, golden beams. The floor was untouched. Ready. He set his bag down, slipped off his shoes, and began to move. There was no choreography, no rhythm, just breath, just muscle, just the quiet rhythm of a man no longer outrunning silence. In the corner, a camera recorded, not for fame, for memory. The studio at Arden became a cathedral of quiet rituals. Each morning, Miles arrived before the sun crested the trees. He unlocked the doors, swept the floor, adjusted the light dimmers, and stood barefoot at the center of the room. Not to perform, not to teach, but to breathe. He had not danced for an audience since arriving. Word spread quickly through campus that he preferred silence. No announcements, no interviews. He declined 3 podcasts, 2 magazine covers, and a feature documentary offer from a streaming giant. Instead, he watched. He observed his students closely, the way one favored her right foot when nervous, the way another tightened his shoulders before every leap. He spoke little, only when necessary. And when he did, they listened. His reputation had traveled farther than he had ever planned. Some came because they admired what he stood for. Others came because they had been broken, too. One day, a young woman approached him after class. She was small, wiry, with a shaved head and a scar beneath one eye. Her voice was rough. "Everyone here," she said, "talks about how you took down a dynasty, but they never talk about what it cost." Miles studied her. "It cost exactly what it needed to." She tilted her head. "You don't miss it? New York? The fire?" "I do not miss being invisible." She smiled faintly. "I do," and walked away. That night, Miles opened the drawer in his office for the first time in weeks. The letter from Arden was still there. So was the drawing Layla had given him. He placed a new object beside it. A letter from Jalen. Typed, formal, but sincere. "Enrollment has doubled. We added a second evening class. Layla now leads warm-ups and corrects posture like a general. You should see her. She's becoming you, but with better balance." At the bottom, "You made space. We're keeping it alive." Miles closed the drawer and turned off the light. 2 weeks later, he received a package. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a single typed note. "We thought you should see how far it reached." The footage was grainy but powerful. Clips from youth dance programs across the country: Baltimore, Oakland, Baton Rouge. Children rehearsing movements clearly borrowed from Jalen's viral routine. In some, the Ashton Collective's name was written on a whiteboard behind them. In others, it was spoken with reverence. He watched for over an hour. Then, without a word, he began writing. Letters. Not to donors or boards, but to teachers, to students. To those who had written to him years ago and never received an answer. He wrote about loss, about grace, about what it meant to keep moving forward even when no one was watching. He signed each letter by hand. 3 months into the semester, the conservatory held its annual showcase. The board urged him to participate, to choreograph, to speak. He declined. But he did agree to one thing, the final piece. He would dance. No announcement, no program listing, no introduction. He appeared on stage barefoot, wearing gray linen, his body leaner, older, but unshaken. The lights dimmed to a cool amber. The music began, just piano and silence. And then he moved. There was no spectacle, no acrobatics, only memory. He moved with the weight of every name that had been forgotten, every door that had been closed, every truth that had been silenced. Each gesture was deliberate, each pause a reckoning. Some in the audience wept openly, others sat frozen, as if afraid to breathe. And when the final note faded, he stood still for one long, aching moment, then bowed, not for applause, for closure. The ovation came anyway. It lasted for minutes. But Miles did not return to the stage. He was already backstage, seated quietly, tying his shoes with calm hands. That night, as the stars pressed against the dark dome above Arden, Miles walked alone down the trail that led behind the studio. The trees whispered above him. The wind moved gently through the grass. He paused at the edge of the overlook. Below, the hills sloped into quiet valleys, speckled with light. He thought of Jalen, of Layla, of Dorian's silence and Gerald's surrender, of Sabine's disappearance from the public eye, of all the lives that had turned because one voice refused to stay quiet. He did not feel triumphant. He felt whole. He sat on the bench at the edge of the cliff, pulled a notebook from his coat pocket, opened it to a fresh page, and wrote 5 words. I was never a servant. Then closed the book, placed it beside him, and sat in stillness. There were no headlines, no cameras, no audience, only the sound of his breath returning to itself and the sky above, wide, open, and finally free.